Okay, thank you, Windows. Around the same time, members of the Balance team were in Montreal to solicit feedback from top players in the World Championship Series circuit. Based on the feedback we received from the community, as well as pro players, we decided to expand the scope of our initial Balance proposal. All right. Below is a rundown. Protoss. Shield battery. Health and shields decrease from 200 to 150 150. That's a straight nerf. Straight nerf. We've been monitoring proxy shield battery strategies. We know who they're talking about right now. And while we don't believe they're unbeatable, we'd like to make this strategy slightly more risky. Risky, okay. Reducing their total health pool. Their total health pool targets. Wait. Just moving on. Weakening offensive usage while mostly maintaining their defensive power. Specifically, this will reduce the number of corrosive vials it takes to destroy them from 7 to 5, which should provide Zerg players with a clear response to this strategy. So this is in reference to, very obviously, the Shield Battery Immortal Proxy that we saw Haz and Shadone and several other Protosses have worked in a lot. Try it. If you want Cero versus Haz. Well, great job, Haz. You got Protoss nerfed again. I feel confident in saying that. And that's a straight nerf. There's no redeeming. Well, there's redemption a little bit further on. War Prism. Pickup range decreased from 6 to 5. Which, it felt like that probably should have happened a while ago, because the War Prism pickups are kind of silly, but received a range pickup, a buff in Legacy of the Void. We enjoyed how it's worked out. Top Protoss players are able to show off their micro abilities to help promote multi-pronged offensive options. One area we feel could use some improvement on is the ability for Zerg players to ward off War Prism Archon openings. Currently, the combined range of the Prism pickup and the Archon is 9, which outranges the Queen's anti-air attack by 1. I thought the Queen's anti-air attack had unlimited range, but okay. We like to reduce pickup range by 1 to allow Queens to interact more meaningfully with Warp Prism play. What that means is they're able to touch it. Like the Warp Prism doesn't just never die. Interact more meaningfully. We believe this change could help open up many different potential Zerg openers, which it will. But we're also mindful of the fact that Protoss players rely on Warp Prism-based tactics. Thus, we'll be keeping an especially close eye on this change. I don't know if that, the Warp Prism Archon openings are really, they've kind of gone out of style, as Zergs have found some ways to deal with them. But, okay, alright, we'll keep an eye on it. Well, here's the redemption, which is the prismatic alignment speed reduction reduced from 40 to 25%. Well, that's what am I trying to compare? We beat you up and took your lunch money, but we left you your shoes. Here, look, we even tied them for you. So, I guess
Good.
That's something.
Now I have your attention.
Well, and now more changes to Zerg. The Queen. Transfusion will no longer instantly heal 125 health. Instead, it will instantly heal 75 health and heal additional 50 health over 7.14 seconds. For Zerg early game, Queens are integral when dealing with light harass and frontal pushes. They also provide a lot of utility with creep spread and their ability to inject larvae. We think the Queen might be a bit too catch-all of a unit right now, so we'd like to weaken one of those roles. With this change, the heal over time portion of the heal will no longer stack. Weakening the effectiveness of chaining transfusions on high HP units such as other Queens. Our goal with this change is to push players towards building combat units when facing dedicated aggression while maintaining the Queen's strength against light harass. Additionally, this reduces the late game power of Queens by lowering the efficiency of rapid transfusions on units like Ultras and Broods. Okay. Well, we're going to look at all the changes and see how they interact first. I think it's important with this if you haven't read over. Creep. Building creep tumor creep generation. Time between creep growth periods increased from 0.3 to 0.45. Overlord generate creep. Time between creep growth periods increased from 0.36 to 0.45. In Legacy, the creep spread was doubled in speed and also recedes at that speed. And then as soon as I say that, they explain, well, this doesn't practically translate into creep spreading twice as fast. It certainly had an effect. It can be almost twice as fast if you're on top of it. That's the result. It certainly has had an effect on Zerg players' ability to control the map. More recently, after much refinement on the part of Zerg players, we began receiving feedback that creep spread might be too oppressive, allowing Zerg to control a large portion of the map leading into the mid to late game. So, by the way, Terran players, this is a pretty big well, both of these, all of this is a buff to Terran. By the way, there are no Terran changes aside from the ones in the original balance update. So, almost all of these are nerfs. So, congratulations, Terran. To help mitigate this, we'd like to experiment with the creep spread rate. So essentially, every 0.3 or 0.45 seconds, well, it's from 0.3 to 0.45 seconds, the creep moves a little bit. It creeps forward. So now it will take a little longer between the periods when it creeps forward. That's pretty much what this means. And the same with Overlord generate creep, if anybody remembers that exists. And Roach. Now, actually, this is an interesting one. Tunneling Claws decreased from 150 to 100. So the same cost as Roach Speed. Still requires Burrow, otherwise you just got fancy-looking Roaches. Tunneling Claws no longer increases the health regeneration of bowed Roaches from 7 HP a second to 14 a second. This is in ZVZ is 90% of where you see Tunneling Claws, but we see a lot of Tunneling Claws Roaches used to harass mineral lines. While we enjoy both the harass and comeback potential that this ability affords Zerg players, we've received a lot of feedback from Zerg that it might be too good. We're talking like very high end here. Because of the high health regeneration with the Tunneling Claws, it can take over twice the number of defensive Roaches to dislodge harassing Roaches. That is a they don't die. One Roach cannot kill a burrowed Tunneling Claw Roach, because it heals fast. 2 Roaches, I think, kill it eventually. I don't know exactly. It depends a little on the upgrades, but that's how annoying they are. Other matchups, Tunneling Claws not seen nearly as much, and when it is used, the moving while burrowed functionality is more valued over the additional health regen. Honestly, well, in a vacuum, I would love them just to increase the decrease the cost and leave the healing and see what happens. But we're not in a vacuum. There's a lot of interactions that happen between all the units and all the matchups, and you can't just buff something out of nowhere. Be like, oh, here's just another buff to units when you already have units that work. Speaking of units that work, Hydralisk health increased from 85 to 90. In the last balance update, the balance revamp, the big one, we went from 90 to 85. Well, guess what? We're back. It lasted about 3 weeks. 85 to 90. Needle Spine's weapon speed changed from 0.54 to 0.57. What that means is a very slight nerf to DPS. Instead of attacking every 0.54 seconds, it's going to be 0.57. So, rejoice. Rejoice, Terran and Protoss. The Hydra no longer viable, according to Twitch chat. That is just too little DPS. Received feedback from all players at Montreal. They'd rather see an attack speed nerf to Hydra. Okay.
Now I have your attention.
I mean, okay, I guess it's a nerf. 0.03 seconds, everybody. By reducing attack speed can reduce how deadly the Hydralisk is in large armies. It's Blizzard. I want to quote Blizzard directly here. It's the least we could do. No, really. It's the least we could do. While still maintaining its ability to fight units like oracles. Yeah, having more HP. If they only have 80 HP, that's 85 rather. Storm does 80 damage. Things like Oracles do a ton of damage. I do agree with the idea behind the change. It's just hilarious. 5%, baby. It's about 5%. DPS nerf. That's something. Now this is a big, interesting one. Infestor, essentially, the Infestor is going on a diet, everybody. Finally, the Infestor has been letting itself go, trying to burrow, unburrow, just getting all caught up like it's slimming down. The unit radius decreased from 0.75 to 0.625. Burrowed unit radius now matches the new unburrowed unit radius. Model scale decreased. Infestors can now move through units while burrowed, which rescinds the change from last year, where they have unit collision underground somehow. Fungal growth will no longer allow affected units to blink, tactical jump, or load into transports. Ooh, that's a pretty big buff, actually. These are all buffs. Going on a diet is a buff, okay? For almost every unit. Like, if the Ultralisk was exactly the same, but like 2/3 the size, that'd be a huge buff, ironically enough. But these are some pretty big moves. Those are pretty big buffs for Infestors. You know that part where I said Terran is getting... All of these are Terran buffs? Well, guess what? No. Wait a second. We've heard a lot of feedback that Infestors feel clunky to use, so we'd like to make a few tweaks to improve their usability. They are very clunky. I fully agree with things like this, where quality of life changes, where you can actually use the unit. It doesn't feel like you're trying to herd goats. Well, cats. I think goats can be herded. Moving on. Nidus Network. Cost decreased from 200, 250 to 150, 150. We received feedback while many players like the direction of the new Nidus. To reiterate, the Nidus Network, they increased the cost, but each worm only costs 50/50, but can be attacked while it's burrowing, like while it's popping up. It has a bunch of armor, so it can't just be taken out by workers, but it can be attacked and killed. So the Nidus Network, the face of the Nidus, if you've ever watched Carbot, was going to get an increase in cost, but now it's actually slightly decreased from what it is at the moment. And the worm, the opposite end of the Nidus, was receiving, well, half the cost, but can be attacked. So they're leaving that, and instead just decreasing the cost of the network. Straight up buff. All-ins are sufficiently... Yeah, if you can attack it, well then the all-ins where you pop out, like... There's the big interaction they're trying to prevent is the Queen Transfusion. Oh, well, okay, I could have just read one more sentence, but I never learned how to read. The Queen Transfusion nerf also is a nerf to Nidus Network all-ins, Nidus Worm all-ins, because, 1, you can't transfuse as much, 2, it can be killed while it's burrowing in, not just after it finishes. So they're trying to remove all-ins and use it more like kind of it's used in Brood War a little bit, as potential reinforcements, as harassment options that don't cost a ton of money. So that's interesting. That could be very interesting, especially with a slight nerf to creep and queens as well. What? Oh, desync. The battlecruiser fixed a typo. Okay, so the summary. Zerg getting a mixed bag. Slight nerf to transfuse. Now, yeah, slight nerf to transfuse. Though in some scenarios it could be a slight buff, but mostly a nerf. Because the scenario where it could be a slight buff is where the transfuse brings it to full HP and then it takes more damage over the next 7 seconds, some of which is healed with the heal over time. But that's about it, and that's kind of a rare scenario. So, and then creep. Slight nerf to, well, actually, I think that's pretty significant. I'll have to play around with it. Protoss just you got the shield battery nerf, you've got the immortal prism proxy nerf, and just the prism micro. It did feel kind of abusive, like you're never gonna kill a prism of a good Protoss player. Of a Protoss, you're never gonna kill that prism. Like, so I'm okay with that, but I'm... And then they're like, no, but Void Rays, though. And this is... Well, it's something. It's something. Remember, there's also changes, nerfs to the carrier, changes to the Tempest. This is in addition. This is not like a new, in a vacuum, balance change. This is an update to the balance map based on feedback and in addition to. So Terran, nothing changes for Terran, but I'm going to add my own Terran section. And we're going to talk about Terran a little bit in relation to all these things. The pickup range, pretty nice for Terran. The shield battery, aggressive shield batteries aren't much of a thing against Terran. And defensively, there aren't that many scenarios where you're killing shield batteries, so they are right. This should not affect much in the way of shield batteries defensively. It's not a dramatic nerf, but aggressively it is. Not a big effect on Terran. The War Prism pickup, definitely not as much of a factor against Terran either, except maybe in the early game, like, proxy meta, where both sides don't have that many units. The Void Ray, maybe we'll see a Void Ray built against Terran. It might happen. The Queen, this is just a straight buff for Terran, because Queen's just used for everything early on, and having Transfuse be a nerf and creep, especially creep. I think Terrans are going to feel this the most, because that's when creep spread is the furthest. A nerf to creep is a buff to Terran straight up, because there's so much creep spread in TVZ, and it's so important. Alright, the Tunneling Claws Roaches. We'll see if that changes much, especially against Bio. No. On occasion, you'll see Tunneling Claws against Mag, but... The Hydra, I mean, 5% less DPS, everybody. Infestors are scary. They're very scary. And they're becoming more scary. The Nidus Network, I honestly, well, we'll see how that goes all around. Still pretty costly, and it doesn't actually get you any new units, is the thing. So it's going to be 200 just to start. 150 for the network, 50 for a worm, and then you might have an opportunity to do something with it. So still not cheap, but we'll see. But overall, those are the updates to the balance test map. You can use the testing ladder to check it out. Hopefully you enjoyed my breakdown. I don't know if enjoyed is the right word. Hopefully you found it helpful. One way or another, make sure to leave your complaints in the chat or the comments below. And despite how much you may dislike any of the changes, make sure to like this video. This is where we edit it out, alright? I'm a professional. I do much editing.